Hello, my name is Pete Nutby, and in this video tutorial I would like to show you how to work with the newsletter component. If you have a website and you have the newsletter component built in, we will have built you a newsletter template. And you now want to know how can you send out a newsletter. Well, if you're logged into the back end of your website, under the menu Components, you will find WCMailer. I will click there, and as you can see here we have an overview of all the configurable options in the mailing component, and I will start off with going through this horizontal or these horizontal items. Users, those are your your members that have been subscribed to a newsletter. You can add and import newsletters from this option. If you click on import, you can import the Joomla users being the users that are members in the website already, or you can import data from a file. And if you import data from a file, that's a comma separated file, a CVS, and at least that needs to have a name and an email column. And once you import it, you can choose to import the users to the so-called list. And you would then click yes, browse to your file and click on import. Back to users, I can also manually add a user and type in and leave everything enabled. What do I want to do? I want to subscribe this user to my one and only newsletter list that I have there. So users are subscribed to lists. When I click on save, you can see newsletter user 1 is now subscribed to list number 1. Now we go to lists. What is the purpose of having one list and the possibility of having several lists? Say that you are an oil company and you have people you want to send a newsletter in Alberta, but also in Ontario and even perhaps in Russia. You could create a domestic newsletter, and you could create a Russian newsletter, and you could then subscribe your users to either your domestic newsletter or your Russian newsletter, and when you send out the newsletter, you have the choice or the capability of sending a newsletter to either one list or several lists. So that is where the lists come in. So I will just create one. I will call it Russian list so that we know what it is for. I will enable it and I'll click on save. As you can see, now I have a Russian list. It has no subscribers. I can then create a new, I'll call it a Russian member. And as you can see now, I can subscribe it either to one list or two lists. So I will only subscribe it to the Russian list. There we go. So this subscription is for the Russian list and this is for the list number 1. Then we have the button newsletters, and this is where you basically will end up being. That is where you create the newsletter. So I want to send out a newsletter. What happens? To create a new newsletter, I click on the button new here. And what happens is it basically creates a placeholder article which is based on the template, the newsletter template. and that template will have been created for you, and that has been created by us. So what it comes down to is I will change the date to a current date, and I will change the content of the newsletter, because that is often the case with a newsletter that doesn't have a different appearance every time. The newsletter is always a similar layout, therefore it uses this template. So therefore you only have to change the content. And that is where we type our new text, and basically if I'm done with my text right now, I can start sending it out. And on the right hand side, very important information, as seen in the lists, who do I want to send it to? Do I want to send it to the Russian list or to the newsletter list? Or you can choose to send it to both. This is the domestic one, not the Russian one, so I only send it to the newsletter list. Very important with newsletters, do not make the error of sending out a newsletter that has mistakes in that, and within 5 minutes you have to resend it. That is the worst case scenario with sending out newsletters. You don't want to have that happen. So very important is to preview or test send a newsletter, and this newsletter component has a good feature to do so. When I click on preview or send, nothing will happen. It doesn't get sent, but it's necessary to do so. I'll click on preview and send, and now we can see on the left hand side that I can send a test message. And normally it will send it to a user on the list, but I can choose other, and then I can fill in any email address I want. As you can see, I can just fill in a test email address, I can receive it, and I can then check out how it looks in my Outlook or in my Outlook Express or in my Hotmail or in my Gmail, because that is essential in newsletters. There are so many different, I would say, readers for emails that it is very difficult to make them all, to make the newsletter look the same in all those applications. So therefore newsletters often have a kind of a more simple layout than, for instance, a website. A newsletter is different than a website. Golden rule: keep a newsletter simple in structure, and therefore that structure or that layout has been prepared for you in this template. At the bottom I can see how it would look when I would receive the newsletter, so that's a preview for you. At the bottom, based on the content inside the newsletter, it also sends out a text version. They're not likely, but there might be still some people out there that do not accept images in newsletters, and they could use the text version instead of the HTML version. I'm ready to send a test, mind you. Very important, send out a test so that you can double check how the newsletter looks. Sending a test. As you can see in the blue info bar, the test has been successfully sent. When I close on the right top, what will happen is the newsletter that I created, that I was working in or working with, has been saved. And you can see that by the fact that it hasn't been published, but it's still available. So I go back to my newsletter, And here you can see that my new title content and my new normal content is still available. My newsletter list is still checked. Then we go to attachments. Not advisable to do, but you could, for instance, attach a PDF document with your report, your yearly report or something. Sender information, not necessary to fill in, except if it needs to be different than the default. I will go out of here. What is the default? The default is set in the configuration. And you can see that the sender information in the mail configuration, that is the information that it will by default have. If that needs to be different in the newsletter you send, that's not likely to happen. But if it needs to be, you can change that in sender information. But overall, you do not need to change that. Say that I am totally ready. I have tested it and I'm good to send it out. Then once I click on preview and send, I'm now brought to the same page as where I can test it, but at the top I will have send, and I can click on send here, and as you can see, this newsletter will be sent to newsletter list 1, 3 people. So that's your double check. Are you sure you want to send that? Click on send. And as you can see here, it lists that the newsletter has been successfully sent to the people in my newsletter list number 1. If you have a list containing of, say, 5,000 subscribers, what this newsletter does is it will send out batches of around 50 newsletters a batch. So that means that the window that you see now will be in front of you for several minutes, because it sends out 50, waits a couple of seconds, sends out 50 again. You will need to maintain that window open. So once you have a big list, do not just close that window. As you can see here, we do not only have send, there's also a schedule button. Very useful for if you are working on it on Sunday, but it needs to be sent out on Thursday, and you know that you'll be in the airplane on Thursday. You can schedule when the newsletter needs to be sent out by filling in the date and time right here. Say that that's on a Thursday that I want to send it out, and you can then schedule it automatically to be sent on March 29th at 1951. That is how you can send and schedule a newsletter. Auto newsletter, campaign, templates, queue, statistics, and configuration. Not likely to be used. Perhaps you might want to change something in configuration. So I will basically skip those settings except for statistics. Statistics go on a per newsletter basis. So for every newsletter that I send or have sent, I can see how many people opened their email, clicked the link in their email, or unsubscribed, forwarded, etc., etc. So that is very useful to see how popular your newsletter is. If you send to 10,000 people and email opens shows 0%, you know you're doing something wrong. So you might want to keep an eye on that. So again, skipping auto newsletters, campaign, templates, and queue, but statistics is a very useful tool in this. So this is in short how you can send out a newsletter and send it out to several lists. Thank you for watching.